So, welcome to the second part of my interview with Andrew Hartman, founder and lead coach of Time Boss. And as I mentioned in the first episode, and if you haven't listened to it, please go back and listen to the last episode, because I met Andrew through his wife, Kelly. And it was through a networking thing that I've been kind of test driving. And I've met some great people through this organization. No business, but lots of great people. And you know what? It's worth it because when you're a solopreneur and you're working by yourself from home, or you relatively isolated, focused on delivering client value and customer value, it's easy to have that absent community. In fact, I was talking to somebody just a few days ago, and they were saying, I think I'm going to go back into the workforce because I miss having a community. Well, as a solopreneur, not that I want to get off this intro with Andrew, as a solopreneur, we have to work twice as hard to create community. So I hope you're being successful doing that. But for me, it comes in a lot of different ways. And I already spoke to that in a prior episode. But meeting Kelly was great. And both of them they're a dynamic couple. And I can't wait to see where they're headed here as we move ahead. So the first conversation that we had, which was the last episode, was all about how they started, how Andrew kind of was inspired through his own challenges to come up with the Time Boss model. And at the time, it wasn't even Time Boss. It was just he was trying to solve a problem that was causing a great deal of stress, and things that were important to him in his personal life were being sacrificed because of the stress he was dealing with in his workload as a COO. And I was just so moved by some of the aspects of their story as they started. So please listen to that episode. In this episode, he actually goes into more detail about Time Boss and about time management, and we talk a little bit about that. And I want to say again, the link to his free YouTube masterclass, which is very good, by the way, is going to be on the show notes page as well as on the My Solopreneur Life homepage. So you can look there under the freebies. There's a link to it, and I hope that you reach out to Andrew and follow him and Kelly because they're up to great things. And I really had a great time talking to Andrew. So thank you, Andrew. I hope you enjoy it as much. Welcome to My Solopreneur Life. I'm Terry Pappy, your gracious host, and I am so glad you're here. I have a wonderful episode for you. Sit back, relax, and let's have some real talk about what it is to be a solopreneur. Andrew, welcome back to the second part of our conversation. And like I said in the last part, I would love to just talk to you forever because there's so many gems in everything that you've shared. And thank you so much for talking about how you got started in your business and how you worked with Kelly and the things that you faced. It was really impactful and real. And I appreciate that. And I know my listener does too. So in this second part of our conversation, I'd love for you to, first of all, talk about the things that you were facing. So when you were self-diagnosing and trying to solve this problem, come up with this methodology, when you look at what you were going through, and as you were figuring it out and kind of like doing these experiments and testing it out on others, and next thing you know, there's success and these things started cascading in a positive way. What are some of the core elements of specific to how we handle stress, how we handle our to-do list, the things that are making us crazy and putting so much at stake because we really are not equipped to handle it. And, you mentioned something about we've got so many things, so many distractions, so many things going on in life, but we're also allowing that. We're allowing that in. And I'm kind of hungry to hear about some of the elements. And I do want everybody who's listening to go to the masterclass that you have on YouTube because you're very generous in giving away basically the whole kit and caboodle. I'm sure that people watching will be like, okay, where can I sign up for a cohort or whatever? So I will have a link to that in the show notes. But let's go ahead and talk about the basic elements of this framework.
Yeah, for sure. So At a very foundational level, we say yes to things because it gives us the life that we want. It's either going to give us results that we care about. We want our solopreneurship to win, we want our company to do well, or we say yes for relationships. I care about this customer, I care about this teammate, I care about my spouse, I care about my kids. We say yes to those things. And what we find early on is yes creates great opportunity. I say yes, I take action, and I get great results, and it's incredible. And what the research shows is that this is positive stress. It's called eustress. This is the stress we actually want. This is the stress that causes us to lock in, do great work, be really focused. Right now, Terry, I'm locked in with you right now. Maximum positive stress. Like, I want to have a great conversation with you. That's what we're aiming for. What happens is, the challenge is, yeses bring us to that moment. So yeses draw us in. We see, if I say yes to things, I get things that I want. What we don't understand is our own capacity. And so we simply keep saying yes. So we say yes to the next project. We say yes to the next relationship. We keep our door open and let ourselves be interrupted. We look at our email all day long for people that need us. And where we find ourselves is we find ourselves cognitively overloaded in that process.
Yeah.
There's more to do than time to do it, which puts us actually in a distress state. So we go from that positive stress to distress. And so the average person is operating in a distress state because they've said yes to too many things. Those things that they said yes to are connected to results they want or relationships they want. And so now they're afraid, if I don't just keep working, it's going to hurt me or it's going to hurt someone I care about. And so truly it's distress, like it's fight or flight stage. And my guess is, for your audience, for you, Terry, for me, like we're doers, we're grinders, we're fighters. Like, if fight or flight are the option, we're going to fight. We're just going to keep working. And so what this does is it compounds stress for us. We're working harder than we've ever worked. We're operating in a distressed way, which means now we start to feel that stress, fear, and anxiety. We're not operating with that exciting peace, freedom, and clarity. It's like, oh no, I have this pit in my stomach. Like, if I don't keep moving, everything's going to fail. And so we both have an experience of life that we don't want. And what's interesting about what the research would say is, when we become cognitively overloaded, we make much poorer decisions. So we are less creative. We don't seek best practice. We seek very deliberate solutions to problems. We're not working less hard. We're actually working way harder than we've ever worked, again, because we're in that distress state, but we're making poor decisions. We're less collaborative because it takes time to collaborate. We delegate less because we figure out too late that it's time to delegate. Or last time we delegated, the person did a terrible job, and we say crazy things like, if I want anything done right, I got to do it myself.
That's a
So
classic one for solopreneurs,
it's
by the way.
it's
Yeah.
and honestly, it's just a poor mindset. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just to gently push back on anyone's listening that's anyone's ever said that. That's not going to serve you in what you're trying to get done.
Yeah.
And so we both have an experience of life that we don't want, and we are getting poorer results. So overwhelm is literally robbing us of the things that we want. It's impacting our results. It's impacting our relationships. We're physically places, but we're emotionally everywhere else because we feel overwhelmed. My story, it impacted my health. You talk to people, they'll say they've got migraines, unending irritable bowel syndrome, hypertension, back issues, poor sleep. Health-related stress issues is your body's yellow flashing lights that you are dysregulated and something has to change. Your body is trying to tell you that something needs to be different. So we get ourselves in this spot. And a lot of it is we think of our brain as this storage device. We notice ourselves remembering things. So we're like, oh, I'll just remember all the stuff. And we load our brain up with all these things that we're worried about. And it robs us from the ability to be fully present in this moment to make great work happen. And so a foundational thesis in Time Boss is, how do I free my brain, pushing things into a system that I trust so that I can be fully present to the thing that's right in front of me? That's really what we're trying to do.
Let me just stop you there, because that in and of itself is confrontational. Because I would imagine that individual who's kind of like having to make that decision or distinction is threatening to the person they've been up to that point, and how they
100%.
think and how they're dealing with life, because it's a new way to deal with life. And even though how they're dealing with life may be flawed, with all these symptoms and all these issues and this constant chronic feeling of overwhelm and under pressure, that they're just afraid to make that commitment. And that's why I love what you've done, because you've given them a pathway. You've basically loaned your horse to them. Said,
There you
here,
go.
get on
To
the
follow the
horse and just
analogy.
go. Exactly. So tell me
Yeah.
more about that, and what does that transition take for them?
Yeah. So I think what you said is very real, Terry, because if you think about so what we've been taught from a very young age is to hustle. In every sport we ever played, like we rewarded hustle. We weren't necessarily making the right play or doing the right thing in sports, but if we were hustling or we were working hard, and so we have honored hard work, which is not a bad thing. Like I am all for honoring hard work, but it is a blunt object. It is not a thoughtful representation of how we should approach an incredibly complex and chaotic world. And so what I encourage people to do is really think about, again, my thesis is we all have a pace that we can operate at. And I am in search of my highest sustainable pace where I can maximize the results I'm getting with an experience of life that I want. And the analogy I use for people is if you think about a marathon, like we all know we can't sprint a marathon. If we sprint out the gate at a marathon, you might last 500 yards. You'll be in first place for those first 500 feet. It'll feel really awesome. And then you're going to end up doubled over and you may not even finish the race. And so we know we can't just sprint. And then on the other end, we know we don't want to walk the marathon, right? And this is what a lot of people do. They'll feel a tremendous stress. They'll check out and say, "Hey, I gotta focus on me right now. No stress 2026, whatever crazy things we say." And which is fine and it's sustainable, but it's not the game that we want to play. We are people that are up to something. We care about our contribution. I imagine the people that are listening care about their contribution. And so for me, you have to find that balance. What is that pace that I can run at to get the results that I want, finish the marathon and actually get to the end. And I think in a solopreneurship, we cannot look at it like a sprint. I could not look at Time Boss as a sprint. It is a marathon. So I had to structure it in a way where I could operate at that highest sustainable pace. And so the way that we do that is the things that Time Boss really solves for is chaos and complexity. From a complexity standpoint, the way that I break it down is there's really just three things that take our time. There's just three types of tasks that take our time. And it's really, once you see it, it's really simple. It's in the masterclass. I'm happy to go deeper into that. But once you understand that your whole world is just three tasks, then you only need three tools to solve for those three tasks. Each of those tasks gets connected to a different tool. And they're very
I
simple
love
tools.
the simplicity of that, by the way, because I'm all
Well,
about simplification.
well, yeah, it's what we said. And I was solving for me in a very complex environment, so it had to be simple in the early stages of startups that I were at. If it wasn't simple, I wasn't going to use it. And I've realized it's become so resourceful to people. One of them is your calendar. You already use your calendar. I'm just showing people how to use their calendar in a way that's going to set up their brain to be fully present. Another is a to-do list. And again, I am just helping people think about their to-do list differently with a very simple set of rules. And the other one is a tool that I call the parking lot. But those three tools simplify the complexity and they deal with the chaos of life, all the things that we can't predict. And then once you understand it's just three tasks, there's just three tools, then I teach people two habits. There's a weekly planning meeting where this is where the name Time Boss comes from. I'm literally taking authority over my future self. I am making decisions on behalf of my future self of how they should prioritize their time. When are they actually going to make these priorities happen that are aligned to their goals and values? What do they do with all the things that don't fit? Because by definition, that you have more to do than time to do it. So your weekly planning meeting, you are mostly saying some very powerful no's to a lot of things. So you can say some very powerful yeses to the things that are going to actually advance your goals and values, and then fully commit to that process. So a weekly planning meeting habit, and then a daily review habit where you are staying committed to this plan. How do I make in-flight adjustments? And then most importantly, in my opinion, especially for solopreneurs, how do I emotionally close down work at the end of the day? So pushing everything back in the system so I can go home, shut my laptop, shut my door, and be fully present to the community that I care about, whether that's a spouse or kids or family or whoever you have outside of life. Oftentimes, if we don't do that close down activity, Terry, we just worry about it all night long, right?
Yeah,
It's just
that's
all,
extremely common.
yeah, and it robs us of presence. It was interesting. Just this morning, I was reading this study. Harvard has done a study on long-term success of children. They just went back to this study, and the number one indicator of success of children is an emotionally present, available parent. And what is the one thing that overwhelm and work robs us of is the ability to be fully present and emotionally present. That's what was going on with me. I would come home when I was overwhelmed, and I would be on the ground playing trains with my son. And in the back of my head, I'm just stressed and thinking about the projects I'm going to manage as soon as he goes to bed. It was robbing me of my ability to be emotionally present and available. And so I am looking to create a system with Time Boss where when you are on, when you are in the work, you are crushing the best work of your life. And when that workday is done or that week is done, you are shutting your laptop, shutting your door, and you are fully present. You decide. You decide where you give your emotional energy and attention when you're not at work. That's what we're trying to generate with Time Boss.
I can see you coming up with all these segments like Time Boss for single parents, Time Boss for athletes, Time Boss for solopreneurs. It's remarkable that a model that you, and I refer to it a couple different ways, model, framework, the
Yeah,
benchmarks that you're creating. But at the end of
sure.
the day, what Time Boss does is it creates this plan. And that's why I love when you said, we have a weekly planner. We don't do that. As a habit, we don't plan. We might like write on our Daytimer or our Franklin, okay, I got to get these things done, but we don't really plan things.
Right.
Maybe a vacation to Europe or something, we'll plan that, but even that isn't really necessarily planned the best way it could be, right? So,
Yeah.
but I love what you just shared, and thank you for kind of compartmentalizing that because I do want my listener, please go watch this masterclass that I will have a link to that Andrew has put on YouTube. It's great. I watched it myself and I'm like, holy crap, I've been doing this all wrong. But it does. You make it so simple and clear. And it's like, yeah, duh. Why do we do that? Um, one of the things I can hear your exasperation because yeah, why don't we do that? But one of the things that I thought of as you were talking about how, we work hard, right? And being busy. One of the things that I find very important is know thyself. And when you understand your, whether it's your Myers-Briggs, your Strengths Finder, your DISC profile, your Enneagram, your astrology, your body graph and human design, the more you understand about your makeup through all those different lenses, the better equipped you are to curate. And this I'm sure would be easy for people who do have that self-examination processed, that they understand who they are. Like me, for example, I am a projector in human design. Projectors don't have they have an open sacral, so we don't create our own energy. And we take energy from other people, but I always wonder why, like, after a lot of interactions, I needed to, like, just kinda lay down for 10 minutes and not
Mm,
sleep, but just, like, regulate my energy because so much of it was given to the conversation or to the experience that I was in, and I always struggled with that and never understood why I just was so wiped. I think it's so important for people to understand that, yes, hard work is important. We live in a culture of generators where we're all, being held and measured by our ability to produce. Are we a producer? Do we get results? I mean, we hear Mr. Wonderful saying that all the time on TV, right? You gotta get results and then you'll get the money from the venture capitalists, right? But if you don't really understand your own makeup, if you don't really understand yourself and how you assimilate energy and manage through the priorities that come in and out of your life, and all this comes into clear view when you're a solopreneur because you have to face this stuff. You have to understand, why is this not working for me? Or why did I always struggle at this in a work
yeah.
environment? And I think that that is hugely valuable as it will support what you've created because that's everybody's unique, right? Just like I was saying, you could do a time boss for, single
Yeah.
parents and things like that. And I think that that level of uniqueness is important because that's what makes that adoption of the time boss thinking and things to do to create those efficiency work that much better and become that much more embedded in their
Yeah.
behavior.
Yeah. No, that's well said. Yeah. And I affirm even what you shared, Jerry, on Time Boss for different segments. It's very true. I mean, the rules of time, I think what's powerful about Time Boss is I think it just deals with the rules of time. Like it's a first principles build of how does time work? I have more to do than time to do it. How do I make sense of that? Or I'm just going to continue to feel overwhelmed. And that's true of, to your point, single parents, athletes, CEOs, college students. My daughter, as a 18-year-old high schooler, has elements of Time Boss that she uses in her world. So it's, going back to the solopreneur, I think this is probably resourceful for your audience as you think about it, Terry. Again, that idea of results. So we were serving individual leaders. That was the way that we were going to market. And Kelly and I could clearly see that we were going to run out of time if we were trying to build the business this way in the direction that we were headed. And so for me, the constraint I put on my life is I wanted to give 50 hours of my life to work. And I think it's a really powerful decision that we all should decide how much of my life do I want to give to work, in the same way you might decide how much of your finances do you want to give to this business. I think it's the same decision. And so by me making that decision and by me creating that constraint, naturally we pivoted towards who are the businesses that are going to experience the most value from this framework. So we serve professional services organizations, we serve construction companies of all different shapes and sizes very well, like extremely well, because they feel a spear in their chest related to time. They're very motivated to solve the problem. So that's where we've turned our attention, because that's going to generate the results, going back to the Mr. Wonderful idea, that's going to generate the results without it running roughshod over Kelly and I and our family and all the other things that we care about. And so I think both of those things are true. I think knowing the results you want, but then having constraints that drive your creativity. If your constraint is every waking hour of your life, you're going to burn out. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And so I think that constraint then helps you solve the problem. A lot of people struggle with, I don't want to niche down. My problem, I can serve anyone, which is great. But I also think you're going to, as solopreneurs, I think we'll struggle because it's going to require so much of your time, effort, and energy, where if you apply a constraint of, I am willing to give 40 hours of my week or 50 hours of my week of 80 hours of my week, it almost doesn't matter. I just think you need to choose it like a budget and then let that constraint drive your creativity of how you go solve that problem. I think that's an incredible opportunity for solopreneurs.
You have to create some sort of pressure point. Otherwise, you're not forced to focus. And I golf, and I'm a terrible
100%.
golfer. I've got like a 24 handicap. But I tell you what, when I hit a terrible tee shot or a second shot and it goes up against a tree or in bushes where I have to, I have no backswing, it forces me to concentrate. And I will tell you what, some of those shots are the best shots I ever make, because I am forced to be very serious and very focused, because I'm limited. So it's that constraint that makes me, like, I got to get out of this situation because I don't want to get an extra stroke by taking a drop, right? Unplayable lie or whatever. And I think that's an interesting analogy to what you're just saying. And this is so valuable for solopreneurs. I 100% agree, because it's natural to be afraid of niching down. And look at the example you gave of the coach, right? Could that be the most niche ever, or what?
Right. Exactly right.
Listen, Andrew, this has been a great conversation, and I want to stress to my listener, I'm going to have all of Andrew's information on the show notes page, but please check it out. Go to mysolopreneurlife.com. I'll also have resources there for you to check out. And Andrew, I can't thank you enough for being here and sharing so much about your experience and telling us about Time Boss. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Terry. I loved it.
Well, I know you're disappointed, but that's it for this episode. Listen, the great news is there's another one coming, so stay tuned. Anyway, I just want to make sure that you do the prompt. If this episode had a prompt, and you get that homework done, because you're going to be a better solopreneur. How's that for a maternal finger shaking at you? Hey, listen, thanks so much for being here, for giving me time of your day, and, for taking it on. So if you want to learn more and stay connected with me, just head on over to mysolopreneurlife.com. Thanks a bunch. See you soon. That was pretty good. I think I'll keep that one.